Good evening, JR.
Hello, Phil. How you doing, bud?
Doing great. We are in what, section 3 about our family disturbances.
Yeah, yeah. This is a good one too.
Family jealousy. We're going to look at Joseph and his brothers. You know, I lay a lot of this onto Joseph's daddy,
Jacob.
Jacob,
Yeah.
Israel, whatever
Israel,
you
whatever you
wanna-
want to call him. Yeah.
whatever you want to call him, because he had this favoritism thing that he grew up with, and he plays his tricks with Esau and fools his daddy, and
Right.
fooled himself right into a big mess later on.
You know, you talk about karma. Jacob got a lot of karma in his back.
He
He thrown
did.
his way, didn't he?
But
For things
how do
he did.
you think he felt? You talk about things coming home to roost.
Yeah.
How do you think he felt when they come in with that blood-soaked
Yeah,
coat?
yeah.
We'll look at that tonight.
Yeah.
We've all experienced hurt from someone close, and I don't know why it is, but it seems like families say the darndest things to other members of the family sometimes. What do we do with that hurt, JR? What do we do with it? Too many of us hold on to that hurt and let it build resentment in us, bitterness within us, and others respond by dishing out the pain to someone else.
Yeah.
Whatever pain they're suffering, someone else got to receive this.
Some people handle it by clamming up when somebody lashes out at them and doesn't, don't speak for
Yeah. And
days
then,
or weeks.
yeah. And then
others.
there's so many reasons for it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Jealousy
Yeah.
being one of the main ones that we're going to look at tonight.
Yes.
How do we approach that family conflict, especially when jealousy? Now, I blame Jacob a lot for this in Joseph,
Right.
and his attitude.
Yeah.
He was spoiled. He was given everything.
Yeah.
It was his attitude, not only towards the children of the marriages, but towards the wives of those kids.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
were treated differently
Yeah.
than Rebecca was,
Right.
who was Joseph's mom. And so, I don't know, a man that
Well,
had
that's-
multiple wives.
But Phil,
that's-
you said something about this the other day. When you take on 4 wives,
You're asking for it, buddy.
I don't know how much you deserve, but you're gonna get everything you deserve. I guarantee you that.
Well, Genesis 37, it records all this, how the brothers got built up an intense hatred for him.
Yeah.
And Joseph had to have felt that before now.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
When you got, he had children of Bilhah and so was Zoe, I
Yep.
forget her name,
Yep.
and Leah and Rebecca, all 4.
Yeah. All of them had sons. Those
All
4
of them
women
had sons. Well,
sons.
that's just the sons. That
Yeah.
you're talking
That's
about.
not counting the
We don't know
girls.
what else that the women
Yeah.
had, but here comes Joseph. Now he's just been given this fine coat,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the others were jealous because of that, and sitting around talking to themselves. Here comes Joseph, and he shares with them a couple of dreams, and in each dream, they were standing up and then bowing down to him.
Yeah.
Next one, he saw the sun, the moon, and 11 stars, and the 11 stars were bowing down to him.
And the sun and the moon, which meant
And the sun and the
was
moon.
Jacob and Rachel. His mom and dad were bowing down to him.
Jacob rebuked him because of that portion of it. Like, why would I be coming and bowing down to you?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it turns out it was right, wasn't it?
It's going to be several years down the road, but it's going to happen, isn't it? I wonder if it says in those verses that we don't read tonight, the prior verses, what we read, what we're going to read. It said that Jacob filed away the experience of Joseph telling him that dream in his memory, because we know God had talked to Jacob in a dream.
He had
I
to.
wonder, 60, 70, 80 years ago, later, when Jacob actually sees Joseph,
Uh-huh.
if he recalls that. I don't know, he might have been too
I
old.
think
He
You
might
know,
have been
I
too
think
old.
he had to,
Well, I think he did too. If he
Uh,
doesn't have Alzheimer's like we do
because he
today.
did, he remembered that the Lord previously spoke to him in a
Yeah,
dream.
yeah.
So one day Jacob sent Joseph to check on his brothers.
Right.
It's a fateful day.
Yeah.
We know jealousy thrives in the world. In this particular instance, his brothers had been pasturing their flocks, and here he comes out to share these dreams with them. Boy, it just don't get any better
No,
for
no.
them, does it? Let's look at the scriptures and
We're
the
looking-
story.
Yeah, we're gonna look at
great.
chapter 37 of Genesis, verses 1 through 4 to start with. It says, Jacob lived in a land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. These are family records of Jacob. At 17 years of age, Joseph tended sheep with his brothers. The young man was working with the sons of Bilhah, and Zephaphah,
Yeah,
the field or whatever,
Zippa.
his father's wives, and he brought a bad report about them to their father. Now Israel loved Joseph more than the other sons because Joseph was born to him in his old age, and he made a long sleeve robe for him. When the brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not bring themselves to speak peacefully about him. Now, before this, Joseph has already told them these two dreams where they were bowed down to him. So you put that in the picture, and then see that Joseph tattletales on them.
It's got it's got everything in here, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Now, those brothers that Joseph had, that's the 12 tribes of Israel. And Joseph is the next to the youngest, and we're going to see that in some of these verses. We're going to talk about that. But the rivalry in this family field was great. The writer talks about the 12 brothers. He had 6 by Leah. That was the first woman he married, thinking he was going to get to marry Rebekah, and Laban, her father, tricked her.
Remember the deceit.
And said, you're going to have to work 7 more years to marry Rachel. And then Rachel didn't have any kids for a long time. She finally had 2, Joseph and Benjamin. But that rivalry probably existed partly because of Jacob's partiality to Joseph, but also because Leah and Rachel fought with their slaves who were wives of Jacob also. And then Leah was always jealous Rachel was jealous of Leah because Leah had all these kids before Rachel ever had any. So the wives even fought. And that goes down into your family. When the wives fought, when your mother and dad fight with somebody, you're going to fight with them. So there was all kinds of rivalries there. And it said that one time Joseph brought a bad report against his brothers. Now, Scriptures doesn't say what that report said. Maybe it was something unethical or ungodly that they were doing, or maybe it was something that
We really don't know.
don't know. It's something that had to do with the flock, and they were losing it, wouldn't take care of the flock or whatever. Or the writer even said maybe it's something that would have caused Jacob to get a bad name. But anyway, we don't know what it was, but he had brought a bad report back to Jacob about his brothers. Then it says that Israel, he calls him Israel here, but God has now changed Jacob's name to Israel. Israel loved Joseph more than he did his other brothers. The writer talks about 2 different reasons why. One was that Joseph was the firstborn son of his favorite wife, Rachel. And they were married a long time and had all but 10 of these other boys were born before Joseph was. And the second one was that Jacob was old when Joseph and Benjamin were born. The last 2 boys listed that he had. And we know that Rachel actually died during the childbirth when she had Benjamin. Right after she had Jacob, shortly after that she had Benjamin, and she actually died during childbirth. So she was pretty old, and so was Jacob getting old at that point in time. Now, we know that Jacob gave Joseph this long sleeve robe, and the long sleeve had a bearing, meant something, because most of them sleeves on their robes were not but elbow length. But these came all the way down and covered their wrist, and said it covered their ankles. And it was, we know, most of the time it talks about being a coat of many colors, a very colorful coat. It was one that was made like those that kings wore, sons of kings wore. It talks about a time when some daughters of a king would wear that kind of robe. It was something special, and the others didn't get it. The writer talks about it signaling an elevation of Joseph above the other people, a distinction of Joseph above the other people. And we see that clothing that Joseph wears throughout his life plays an impact on what he's on his life. If this, of course, it's the coat that he had that his brothers couldn't stand. We know that once he was in Egypt and working in the king's palace, that the king's wife tried to accuse him of raping her, and he runs away from her and she grabs his coat, and that's how he gets caught, knowing he's in the king's palace with the wife, was because he's left his coat behind. Mm-hmm. But then later on, we know that when the truth gets told about that situation, and another Pharaoh comes along, Joseph works his way back up to the second in command of all of Egypt when the droughts came and so forth, and he gets another big robe like he had when he was with his father, a colorful robe that meant he was almost like a king. And it finally says there that the brothers could not speak peacefully. Phil, we've seen a time in our family sometimes when you can't walk in a room with somebody without, it's best just not say anything, because whatever you say it's going to be
wrong.
It's either going to be said in a bad manner or it's going to be taken wrong, one of the two. So you best not say anything. But they couldn't actually keep their mouth shut. Their hatred was such that they demonstrate a contemptuous manner toward him, a hatred toward him that it showed out in their speech. Now, two or three things we could say that they probably called Joseph. They probably called him Tattletale.
Yeah.
Because he told about them in the herds. They probably called him Daddy's favorite, because everybody knew that. There wasn't any question about that. And they probably called him a dreamer, because that wasn't the only time he had dreams and told it to the people, to his brothers and everybody else. That's one of the things that God gave Joseph the ability to do, was to interpret dreams. Mm-hmm. So he called him a dreamer, a tattletale, and a Daddy's favorite. And we're not going.
There were several sources of dislike there,
yeah.
wasn't it?
Well, now, when you talk about their speech toward their brother, we've had over the last 6 weeks, 2 or 3 months, a good example of bad speech, of hatred shown toward each other, and in our political process.
Oh yeah, gosh.
I mean, neither one all the candidates could not say anything good about the other person. It was always a hatred or something that.
It felt like they felt that they had to.
Yeah.
They couldn't say anything good about it because they knew it would be taken and put into a commercial and used against the other person.
That's true. So we see all about that hatred that they showed toward their brother on TV today in our commercials.
Yeah.
But so the stage is set for them to act upon that hatred.
This unchecked jealousy and animosity leads to greater harm within the family.
Mm-hmm.
And this was runaway. It was unchecked.
Yeah.
Let's look at 19 through 24. They said to one another, "Oh, look, here comes that dream expert. So now, come on, let's kill him and throw him into one of the pits. We can say that a vicious animal ate him. Then we'll see what becomes of his dreams." Well, when Reuben heard this, he tried to save him from them. He said, "Let's not take his life." Reuben also said to him, "Don't shed his blood. Throw him into the pit in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him," intending to rescue him from them and return him to his father later. When Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped off Joseph's robe, the long sleeve robe that he had on. Then they took him and threw him into the pit. The pit was empty and without water. Situation escalated here. That dream expert they talked about. The dream was not just. It was what he was presented in his dream and his truthfulness in telling them. But part of that dream and the result of that dream was exactly what his brothers were about to do to him. When we look back and we see how God works, it's amazing. Those dreams, along with the garment that Jacob had given him, triggered the brothers' jealousy and hatred of Joseph so much that they had to act on it. Like you said, the titles that they gave him, Tattletale, a dreamer.
Yeah, dream expert here, yeah.
And you know, dreams played a prominent role in Joseph's
Yes,
life
they
too.
did. Yes, they did.
The brothers thought they were killing the dream by eventually selling Joseph. And in reality, they were advancing the fulfillment of the dream.
Yeah.
That wasn't their intent. That was
No.
God's intent. And it was shining through here. Now, these pits, JR, a lot of times, many folks around here recalls the old cisterns.
Right, right.
And how they would get inside and they'd patch them up. They'd mortar the sides and everything, attempt to get that thing to hold water for the family.
Most time run water off your roof down through a gutter or something down
Yeah.
into it.
And then over in this country, that didn't always work out.
Right.
A lot of times they were dry.
Yeah.
If there was anything in there, it was a scorpion or something
Yeah.
that wasn't good. And in this instance, the pits being bottle shaped or hourglass shaped with a small opening at top where they could cover it up,
Yeah.
made it near impossible to get out of unless someone came along and got you out. So when they put him in there, it was their intent for him to die in there, just rot in there.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Reuben was Jacob's oldest son with Leah. And Reuben, we see him in both positive and negative lights. Negatively, Reuben later on had relations with Bilhah, who was one of his mother's servants,
Right.
and
And the wife of his dad.
wife and mother of his father's child.
Yeah, yeah.
So we see that Reuben wasn't always on the up and straight and narrow, was he? But Jacob chastised him for all that behavior, that defiling behavior. But positively here, he protects Joseph in this situation. He didn't want him to outright kill him, and he had plans probably to come back and pick him up out of that hole and take him back to his father.
Yeah.
Reuben also had assumed responsibility for Benjamin's welfare when Joseph, whose identity was unknown, we would see that later on, when he was there in Egypt, and he asked for their other brother. Reuben said, I don't know about that. Why don't you take me?
Mm-hmm.
And but wouldn't nothing else do but the youngest brother be brought to Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
So they had stripped off his garment. That's again tearing away that garment.
Well, you don't think they just folded it and laid it down?
I don't think he gave it up.
I don't think he
And
did either.
they were going to eventually
Yeah.
make it look like a wild animal
Yeah.
had a hold of it.
Yeah.
So they didn't bother them to strip it off, tear it off of his body.
Mm-mm.
So it was a pretty violent thing, stripping him of that special robe. And we see that, it wasn't just resenting. Right now they're playing it out. This strategy to get rid of him. They were planning on how they were gonna explain all this to their father.
Right,
You
right.
know, we're making it up as they go. They were making up an alibi that the father would believe. Joseph went from prominence in the pit in one day,
Yeah.
from prominent son, favorite son, to someone in the pit that's gonna rot. Do you think it was his fault?
He probably played a little bit of role in them resenting him because of the way he knew he was a favorite. There wasn't any question about that. I mean, the whole family knew that he was a favorite, but you could have backed up a little bit and tried to say, well, I'm not really a favorite, but he flaunted, I think, being the favorite. Or seemed like he did. He didn't back down from it.
It did to me too. The way we read it, I guess, makes a difference, but it just seemed like he reveled
Yeah, yeah,
in telling this dream.
yeah,
Didn't
yeah. Oh, yeah. The
he
dreams-
probably reveled in coming in there after having just dined a special meal with his father or something, and he probably just reveled in front of the brothers, and they thought, yeah, they didn't much care for that.
He didn't shy away from the fact he was the favorite.
He didn't. But they put him in there without water, Jay.
Oh, yeah,
The intent was for him to die.
yeah.
So Reuben's compromise that he offered there saved his life.
Right.
And wound up coming back and selling him and getting a little money for him. But boy, they laid him out there. When we look at these relationships, what provokes envy in sibling relationships today? But not only sibling relationships, relationships all over.
Yeah.
What provokes that envy in our
This was mainly
relationships?
jealousy. They were jealous of how their father treated him, envious of that special treatment he got.
Yeah. See, there again, I don't think that was his fault actually, because the status that he was given by his father, a favorite,
Right.
that's his father's fault.
That's true.
on him. You can't fault a dumb kid for wanting that and for taking it and then rubbing other people's faces in it. You know, maybe you're rubbing their faces in it. He didn't have to do that. But any kid's going to accept that.
He was probably pretty young then too. He was probably.
Well,
It doesn't say it
Yeah,
all. But
yeah, he's
probably-
17 when this happens.
That's true. That's exactly right. He was 7. He was a teenager. Is what I was going to say. But yeah, it talks
And
about that.
17 at that time is a
Yeah.
lot older and wiser than what 17 is today, I think. You know, with the
Could be.
daily grind
Could
that
be.
they had to go
Could
through.
be. Yeah.
I think he probably knew what he was doing. But in the next verses, we see how our actions can either benefit or cause great harm to others in the family. And I think this was a wake-up call for Joseph in a lot of ways.
I think so too. When he hit the bottom of that pit, he had to.
After he'd been there for a while, you know it
Yeah.
had to shook him up, didn't it?
And the verses we don't read are where it talks about the caravan coming along while the brothers were sitting around eating, and there were some Midianites, Midianites, I think. Yeah, he brought it. We were coming along in the caravan, and they had some stuff to take to Egypt. So they said, "Why don't we just sell him?" So they sold Job to these people, and I'm sure the writer talks about him having a month's travel from there on into Egypt. And it was probably all by foot. He wasn't treated like he was when back at his home when
He wasn't a
when his
favorite no
he wasn't
more,
a favorite. He was the low man on the totem pole, unless there was another slave there with him. So it says then, after that, he's gone on the caravan now. It says, so they took, that's the brother, so they took Joseph's robe, slaughtered a male goat, and dipped the robe in its blood. They sent the long sleeve robe to their father, and said, we found this. Examine it. Is it your son's robe or not? His father recognized it. It is my son's robe, he said. A vicious animal has devoured him. Joseph has been torn to pieces. Then Jacob tore his clothes, put soft sackcloth around his waist, and mourned for his son many days. The brothers now came up with a story of how they could what they could do to convince their father that Joseph was dead, because they assumed he wasn't going to live very long in that, as a slave. And they just really assumed they would never see him again. Even if he lived 100 years, they would never see him again.
I find it ironic, the thing that he used to deceive his father with Esau, the goat skin, and the blood from the goat, and the hairy arms, they made the soup out of the goat. And the very thing that he'd used to deceive his father was now being used to deceive him.
Yeah. Well, they decided to cover up what they'd done by slaughtering a male goat, tore the coat, poured the blood on the coat, and took it to Jacob, and said, "Examine it, and see if you think it's your son's." Well, they knew that Jacob was going to know what it was, because there was probably another coat like it, wasn't but one coat like it. And Joseph said, "This is my son's robe." Now this same robe had several different aspects to it over this short period of time. We don't know how long Joseph had it, but probably not a few years. First, it had signaled an enthronement, an elevation, a distinction of Joseph over his brothers. That's the first thing it meant. Then it meant a dethronement or a death, as his brothers stripped it off of him and threw him in the pit. Then it represented the death of Joseph's dreams. Those brothers, you already mentioned this, those brothers probably thought to themselves, aha, let's see if we ever bow down to you now when you're in that pit, or when you're going to Egypt and being sold as a slave. We're not ever going to bow down to you. That dream is dead. The robe had been created as a evidence of a great love between a father and a son. Then it was dipped in blood to show the hatred between that same son and his brothers, who couldn't stand him anymore, wanted to get rid of that family dreamer. It had been a tool of deep deception, as you just talked about. Joseph's son sent this bloody robe to their father, dipped in blood, the same way that Joseph was deceived. Joseph deceived his dad in order to get his blessing, and took the blessing away from Esau. Jacob concluded, that a vicious animal had devoured him. The brothers didn't even have to tell Jacob what they thought had happened. He realized that's what had happened. He came up with it on his own. They didn't have to lie to him about anything of that, as far as that's concerned. And Jacob probably knew about the risk that, especially a lone wanderer would take, he sent them from where he lived out to where the guys had their flocks. And it might have been several miles. It was out in the desert, and there were a lot of wild animals there. There were a lot of lions there. So Jacob knew it was a possibility, for sure. So then it says that Jacob tore his clothes, put sackcloth around his waist, and mourned for many days. Do you think, Phil, that bothered them a little bit, that their son was?
Can you imagine being there?
That their dad was felt like that?
Sitting and watching their father go through this grief.
Yeah.
Tearing his robe, tearing his clothes, and wailing and the way that they do, and knowing you're the source of it.
Yeah.
What you've done has caused that.
But they also looked at their dad and say, aha, this is what you get for
playing favorites.
I don't know how much I'm sure it bothered them some, but they knew Joseph wasn't dead. They thought he would eventually die, of course.
Well, they spent him to his death or slavery. Joseph the dreamer's not going to be in our area.
He's not going to be bothering us.
He's gone to Egypt as a slave, so he won't fare very well.
And that's the way they mourn, and they still mourn like it. Feel in the Middle East today. Sometimes they put ashes on their face or on their head. They beat themselves with chains or ropes. They go around wailing and moaning. The women wear dark clothes. If they don't have enough family members themselves to mourn, they'll hire people to mourn for them. I don't think that'd be a very good job.
No.
But anyway,
that'd be kind of like hiring a pallbearer.
Yeah. And it says he mourned for several days. In fact, verse 35 says something along these lines that I won't stop mourning for my son until I'm dead, till I die.
Yeah.
I will mourn him the rest of the days of my life.
And you know, you talk to people who've lost children, and that's the way it is.
Oh,
They never get over it.
I
And I
can't.
don't know that you're supposed to get over it.
Yeah,
It's supposed to stay with you.
I can't imagine what it would be like. And we've had people in this church who have
I
lost
don't want
children. Huh?
It's selfish. I don't
Yeah.
want to.
Yeah. We've had people in this church that have lost children, and we've seen them appear to be doing fine, but they still have that hurt
Years later.
years later. Judy and I both lost our fathers when they were pretty young, and we were pretty young. And it helped tremendously that we had each other. When my dad died, I was just 12 years old, but by the time her dad died, when she was 16, we'd been dating for a year or two, and we worked through that together. And when we gosh, we would talk about our dads on dates, and that helped us tremendously to go through that grieving process. But if it's a child, it would be tough.
Yeah.
It would be tough. So this conspiracy is growing, and the hatred that they had is now. I bet they think they're done with that. They don't have any other problems. Joseph will never show up in their life again. They're through with that dreamer, that favorite in their life. But
Let me ask you this. What steps can we take to consider how our actions are going to impact and affect other people? Be it a family member, a friend, or an enemy.
yeah.
What steps can we take to consider how our actions are going to affect them? I don't know that they were prepared to see the amount of grief stricken in their father because I think they were all kind of remorseful after that when they saw how it affected him.
Well, the first thing you got to do is not react every time somebody says something that's not exactly the way you think it ought to be said. You need to step back and consider what's going on and the situation that they're in and you're in, but that's not easy. We like to lash out, don't we? When somebody
Count
says
to
something.
10,
Yeah.
you know, your answers are going to be different.
Yeah.
That's one thing, but you know that can work both ways. You can build up animosity, or you can think, now how can I talk and put across a point without escalating this situation or making it worse than what it already is?
If you have time to think about it and pray, you can pray about it. Of course, Phil, I went to visit somebody the other day and in the hospital, and for a while I took a step into the room. I asked God to be with me and lead me as I was in there. And God does it that quick. He can help you in a situation just like that. So you can always say a quick prayer. Lord, help me say the right things.
Yeah. But you have to do it.
Yep.
You know, have to take that action to do it. So, what actions we take in response to today's study? Ask God to show you where you're feeling animosity or perhaps jealousy in a relationship. It could be toward a family member, a close friend, a fellow worshiper. Pray for that person and ask God to show you a way forward, help you work through your feelings of animosity, hatred, dysfunction, whatever those feelings may be.
Is there a place for us to have animosity or anger toward a fellow church member?
When he is or she is working against God.
Okay.
And you know, you have to be careful about how you're judging people. But
Mm-hmm.
then that requires prayer, and God will show us a way forward on that if we pray and ask about it. And you know, typically no.
Yeah.
animosity,
When
hatred.
somebody's just, if we just feel like somebody's picking on us and not doing anything against God,
Pray
the
about the
answer-
situation.
the answer is no, we shouldn't have it.
Begin and end your day with prayer, Bible study. Every morning, ask God to help you be aware of the wrong motives in your heart. If I'm praying in my heart, and as we do that, He'll make us aware. I think He makes us aware if we're going to have hurtful thoughts, and those thoughts are going to ruin or tarnish a relationship. And then confess each night when you find you've fallen short. And once you confess, don't be long about apologizing
Yeah.
to those who you offend. Celebrate what you see God doing in your life. If you're sitting there and you're praying to Him each day and offering up yourself, your life, and commitment to Him, He's Lord over relationships. And celebrate what you see God doing in relationships. If He's bringing someone closer to you and you don't understand it, celebrate it and say, God, just help direct me in the way that I should go. Joseph went from prominence to the pit in one day.
Yeah, yes.
The conspiracy grew legs with the brothers when they acted on that hatred and that animosity. Unchecked animosity can lead to greater harm within a family, a group of friends, or a family of believers. So, there's no quick fix. Get on your knees. Pray about those things. Let God lead you. And don't let your actions become a permanent mark on somebody's scorecard of life. Where,
But in this case, with Joseph now headed towards Egypt, and the brothers heading back towards the family, this is the last of this story. They're never gonna run into each other again.
well, not so fast.
Okay.
We'll talk about that next
There you
week.
go.
We'll see where Joseph reappears to his brothers.
And we'll also see that between now and then, how much God uses Joseph. Joseph was an amazing man. He might have been a little bit brash at the beginning, but he lost that when he went in that pit, I think.
Oh yeah, yeah,
He was
yeah.
pretty.
And as a slave in Egypt, I would say you got humbled real quick.
He was pretty humble from that point on, but God used him for great things
Yeah.
throughout his life.
Thank you for joining us in the Bible study today. Hope you can be with us next week. You all have a good evening.